Good morning, comic book fans. Welcome back to Ka-Pow Comics, and we're carrying on our best of 2021 top three now. Oh yeah, and it's John Ridley's The Other History of the DC Universe, and there's a lot to talk about for this one. But first of all, I'll start by saying, unbelievably, me being a massive leftist occasionally has an impact on what comic books I really enjoy. However, I do try to justify this, not just in terms of me being a massive leftist, but also the comic is very, very good. This was one of the trickier ones, simply because it is so into like my wheelhouse in terms of what I really like reading about, but was also very, 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 very good indeed. And it was a surprising thing that it was so good because I put it on my pull list thinking this does sound like a cool concept. I like the idea of underrepresented voices being involved in the comic book industry, and I like the idea of telling stories of characters that don't really get as much detail as one would like. But the only John Ridley I'd read until this point was the Future State Batman stuff, which I did not enjoy. And I don't mean that in like I don't want to poo on the guy or anything. It's just, it wasn't for me. I tried. I like Batman. I actually really liked The Future State Detective by Mariko Tamaki, which is fantastic. Dan Moore on the artwork, everything I wanted. But his Batman one, it's the same criticism I've leveled at a lot of people who've come into writing something else who want to do comic books. It just didn't quite land in terms of how a comic book can read and can be great, and it was disappointing, to say the least. But I did put this one on my pull list because, as I've said, massive leftist. This is very much in my field, and what it is basically a lot of DC superhero characters who generally, for most of their history, and quite often, even relatively recently, will have been written by non-marginalized groups, shall we say. I've not looked into all this completely. I'm probably gonna have a bunch of people saying, "Oh no, you'll find that this character was written by this person." It's totally fine. I will admit that my research on this one isn't been great, but a lot of these characters, when they were created, there simply weren't that many different voices in the industry. So a lot of their early stories would have been kind of by necessity not as authentic as one would have liked. And that's not to say they're not good stories. I don't want this to be just pooing on other people writing these characters. I think you can have some absolutely fantastic stories told like this, but a step into the right direction for representation is a good thing. And there's certainly grounds to criticize a little bit in the fact that some of these voices are female for female characters, and it's a male writer. And I do get that criticism, but after watching a lot of The Good Place and listening to the podcast about it, one of the things that they were really keen on is the idea that perfect is the enemy of good when it comes to trying to be better. There is no reason to be like, well, if we can't get an absolutely perfect voice for this character who's going to represent everything the character has lived through, then why do we bother at all? Why not just have another white guy doing it? I dislike that. I like that. Prefer the idea of, excuse me, if we can just make it a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more representational, then why not do it in the hope that one day perfect might happen? But don't dismiss good or better because it's not perfect. However, in this particular case, it comes across as something pretty darn close to perfect. Almost an understanding that Ridley needed a little bit more time to get his head sorted out in terms of how to properly put together a comic book story. By effectively just doing prose and letting the writing team come in, the art team, come in and use the artwork to tell the story around it. And it's a very effective thing. I'd be kind of interested to see how their creative process worked, like how much of it was just Ridley presenting with pages and pages of prose, and then the people doing the layouts and the inks actually came in and worked around it, or if it was more of a backwards and forwards kind of thing, which I think I prefer. The idea of like, this is a story I want to tell. Okay, this is how we can tell it. Cool. This is where I need to frame my words. This is kind of like how much space I've got for layering, because it is managed pretty well. And it's a tricky thing to do because there is a lot of prose in this. It goes a little bit above and beyond just, expositional text boxes. This is effectively a story being told just in prose, but I'm not entirely sure it would be as effective without the art. It reminds me a little of Neil Gaiman and Charles Vest doing Stardust, which was a prose story with fantastic artwork, which really brought it to life. It's the same kind of thing here, and the writing is absolutely brilliant. It is harsh and it's cutting at times. It is unforgiving at times, but one thing it does do is allow its characters to fail, to be flawed, and to forgive themselves for their failings. It doesn't hold them to account as being like, well, you are the marginalized voice in this society, so you speak for all marginalized people. It certainly frames their existence as if that is what they should be doing, but Ridley doesn't let the characters feel like that is everything they need to be. He lets them be individuals and have their own personalities and foibles and goals and relationships. The relationships is one of the things I really like about it. You get people who were like multiple superheroes in the same family and how they interact with each other and how they see things different as time goes on, because it also does genuinely show time passing. Now, within the context of storytelling universes within superheroes and comic books, it's a little bit tricky to do like one for one kind of time telling, time passing. The Marvel Life Stories ones do like entertaining jobs of that one, but they kind of lean into the fact that, yeah, eventually Peter Parker to be 50, 60 years old. It doesn't quite do it with this one, but it does show that these characters, instead of just being reinvented at every rebirth or every relaunch or every whatever, they actually lived through things that were happening in the real world as well, and grew up with the characters. And when something happened that affected these characters, it was because the world was changing as a result of it. So you get to see the kind of character growth and development that is very rare in short form comic book storytelling like this. It's usually just done as more of like in a backstory kind of thing of like, oh, these characters has been on so long, so they obviously have changed. This is actually no, these have changed. They have moved on from certain things and they're embracing new ideals. And the artwork is glorious. The fact that it is mostly just backdrop art to prose kind of gives them freedom to be a little bit more inventive, but never to the point that they're pushing for the sake of pushing. This isn't just, I can do a crazy page layout, I'm going to do a crazy page layout. It's, how can I use the fact that I'm still trying to marry my artwork to a story, but I don't have speech bubbles and I don't have text box outs. I don't necessarily need to do fight sequences unless I really want to, so I can just do the story at the pacing which fits rather than what's expected. And as a result, you get some absolutely brilliant pages. There's an awful lot of double page spreads, and quite often when they do that, there's also like playing with panel within panel, which I really, really like. There's a couple of moments where I think I'm a bit more used to one page and two pages, and I had to double back and reread the text to make sure it was flowing in the right place. But I think that's more just me falling into an old trap rather than any lack of decent storytelling on the part of the creators. They actually did a really, really good job, and I just needed to be better at following it. It's now completed, and Ridley has gone on and started writing I Am Batman, which I've read the first couple of issues of, and I really, really liked it. Certainly, there's been a growth in his ability as a writer, and I'm really interested to see what else he's going to do. I can't wait to see what else he's going to do, actually. I'm hoping that this is also a bit of a chance for like stories to tell a history of characters that have been slightly marginalized, and also tell real stories, like a current story, about these kind of characters. And hopefully it gives companies like DC and Marvel and other ones permission to deal with like politics of race and gender and sexuality, and actually use those as part of the story, rather than either make it a story about them or sideline it. There's a middle ground in there, and I think Ridley has proven that it's an interesting middle ground you can take, and people will trust you in it. They won't just think, oh yeah, he's just doing this because he's wanting to be all woke. He's doing it because it's a great story and it's one that needs to be told and really should be read. And I really, really enjoyed reading it. That's it for me today, though. I'm going to come back tomorrow with number 2 on my list. Very close to the best thing I've read all year. But for today, that's it. Until I see you again, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.